Right in the main street of Cessnock, the new library was formerly a supermarket. Purchased by the council for $225,000, it's now been transformed into a very impressive library by the expenditure of a further $350,000. The shopfront location has already had an effect. The borrowing of books in Cessnock is up by 20%. Along with the new building, an expansion of services is planned, including the installation of mini computers so that library users can get practical as well as theoretical computer knowledge. The strong link between Cessnock Library and the community it serves was underlined by the opening ceremony. Instead of by a politician, the honours were done by representatives of 4 sections of that community: senior citizens, the general public, high school students and primary school students.
Gratefully acknowledge this wonderful addition to the wealth of resources available in this city. Thank you.
On a visit to Newcastle in his role as State Shadow Minister for Planning and Environment, Liberal member Peter Collins said his party, if in power, would consider closing the dockyard, and he claimed it was unrealistic to consider the dockyard could handle a contract like the submarine replacement program.
You're talking about a dockyard which is trying to get back into the shipbuilding business, a dockyard that isn't currently building ships, and submarines are the most sophisticated naval vessels that any dockyard can attempt to construct, and therefore I think it's a most unrealistic target in terms of, again, making this dockyard profitable.
Dockyard's General Manager, Jim Kelly, however, reacted strongly to Mr Collins' comments, claiming they were unfounded.
I'm not really interested in the dockyard. Can move into being able to build those submarines. We are short of the technology, we're short of some of the contract management skills, but so is everybody else in Australia.
But what about other shipyards that are currently building ships, that currently have modern technology and equipment? Wouldn't they have an advantage?
No, they would have no advantage at all. We have as much knowledge of Navy requirements as anybody else. We're doing Navy refits, we work with Navy quality requirements, but all of the quality requirements that Australian shipyards are using would have to be upgraded for building of submarines.
Dr. Mike, real name
we honour you today, Dr. Harmony, not solely because you are a doctor, but because you epitomise the old-style family doctor, and we count you today as one of us. Humour, for your ability to move easily through all kinds of people, we do greatly respect and admire you. We want to present the 3 Seventh-day Adventist Church Community Service Award for outstanding service in the community is something that you will long remember us for.
Dr. Mike is every recipient. Their site is easy to call with patients go down the hole. One elderly Scottish patient was named in honour of Scotsman because of his devotion to duty.
Several departments will operate from the new building from tomorrow. However, its official opening is still some way off. Newcastle has had to wait many years for its state office building. The selection of the site was controversial. The deep and water switch behind the Coxhill fire station was finally chosen. Even when worked by these tenants, there were every hold-up because the building is still not fully fitted out, and landscaping is yet to be completed, but some departments could wait no longer. So this weekend, there's been a constant stream of locusts and government employees collecting equipment and files from several sites around Newcastle. The government is yet to make clear just which departments will actually be used. They will visit criticism is likely to be a limiting factor.
Thanks, John. Good morning. Beautiful clear skies. I'm afraid out here at the beaches this morning it's a bit Lake City. That's not quite Flat City, a little bit bigger, but the waves are very small. The swell's been battered by constant offshore winds over the last 2 or 3 days. We still have those offshore winds blowing from the west at the moment, and the waves around 1/2 to 1 metre at the open beaches in town. Of course, with the tide being almost high, conditions are looking rather full, and the waves aren't breaking as prevalent as they will be later on in the morning as the tide starts to run out. Best time for surfers will be around 11 to 12 o'clock at the open beaches in town, and if you'd like to go for a swim today, all of our city beaches quite safe. Now, weather-wise, we've had a great weekend. It's been superb, in fact, and you wouldn't like to think that it would continue that way, would you? But the forecast for today, mild, mainly sunny, with northwesterly winds at 10 to 20 knots during the day. That's 20 to 40 kilometres per hour. Seas slight to moderate on a low swell. Newcastle heading for a top today of 22 degrees. 20 degrees for Scone. High tide coming up at 1 minute past 8 this morning, 1.4 metres. Low tide at 1:31 this afternoon, 0.4 of a metre. And the outlook for Tuesday, dry, cool with westerly winds. And so there we have it. Tiny waves for the board riders around 1/2 to 1 metre at the open beaches. They're going to be a lot more prevalent towards low tide around midday. If you'd like to go for a swim, City Beach is quite safe. Heading for a top today of 22 degrees and those westerly winds to stay with us. Conditions tomorrow will be a little bit cooler, so catch that sunshine while you can. That's it from me. Back to John.
Within the Adventist community, it is referred to as God's Acre. Tucked away in a gently sloping corner of the Avondale College, the small cemetery is a true resting place. It is in harmony with its surrounds. A fringe of trees protects it from the bustle of the life that carries on around. The only sounds to break the silence are those of the birds that nest in the nearby glades. The cemetery dates back to the turn of the century. Within its boundaries are the graves of many prominent Seventh-day Adventists. The National Trust has classified the Avondale graveyard simply because it is unlike any other. Absent are the traditional large ornate memorials. Instead, there are neat rows of graves all identical. As well as giving an overall look that is aesthetically more pleasing, the unobtrusive graves say something about the Seventh-day Adventist faith, which teaches against any distinction between rich and poor. Farlap was a big, bold chestnut horse that reigned as king of the turf in the depression-gripped Australia of the 1930s. His story is one of love and tragedy, a tale firmly ingrained in Australian folklore. The life and death of the beloved Big Red have been recreated on film, an Australian film that critics are tipping will be a box office smash. Farlap premiered in Newcastle last night at the Hoyts Royal Theatre. It was undoubtedly the grandest movie launch that the Hunter Valley has ever experienced. As audience members arrived, they were greeted with red carpet and some 30s style music courtesy of the Kahaiba Bowling Club brass band. When everyone was seated, NBN newsreader Ray Deneen explained the purpose of the premiere. The proceeds will go to the Lake Macquarie Police Boys Club. Then the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The curtain rose and the story of Australia's best known and best loved racehorse began to unfold on the screen. More than 200 local industry representatives attended last night's annual meeting and dinner. Guests included representatives from the Hunter Development Board and the Newcastle Chamber of Commerce and Industry, union officials, authorities from the University, the College of Advanced Education and the region's technical colleges. Representing the City Council was the Deputy Lord Mayor Alderman Don Geddes. The welcoming address was made by the chairman of the Metal Trades Industry Association, Mr. Tony Viscogliosi. He stressed the need for industry to adapt to the present economic situation. Investment, he said, is the key to future expansion. But he was careful to point out that equally important as capital investment is the need to invest in human skills.
One of the most worrying aspects of the recession has been the decline in the apprentice intake and the termination of some indentures because of economic circumstances. I am pleased to be able to say tonight that arising out of our submissions to the federal and state governments, extra funds have been made available to assist apprentices whose continued employment is in jeopardy.
At the conclusion of his speech, Mr. Viscogliosi presented the MTIA Apprentice of the Year award to 20-year-old fitter and turner Stuart Beasley. Stuart is employed by the Adamstown firm Griffiths Proprietary Limited and is one of a staff of only 7. The address by the BHP's Mr. David Rice was titled Steel in Australia, Past, Present and Future. Using graphs, Mr. Rice gave a brief précis of steelmaking trends over the past 10 years. The graph showed not only the downturn we are facing now, but a whole series of ups and downs in BHP Steel's productivity. Mr. Rice says the present slump is the result of decreased domestic demand and increased overseas competition. However, he was able to express some optimism by pointing out that BHP did plan to invest in Newcastle in the foreseeable future.
The board last Friday approved the expenditure of $6 million approximately for the re-engineering of the Iron Curtis in Newcastle, the sister ship of the one that is the Iron Carpentaria that's been re-engined now. And that's another, I think, plus that's coming to Newcastle, but I see further expenditure occurring in the plant itself, perhaps not on the same scale as occurred back in some of the heavier days, but we're going to continue to invest. We've got to continue to invest if we want to remain viable, and we're going to remain viable. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
They're out of control in an area where they're not paying sufficient tax like every other section in the community. Hotels and most other businesses pay income tax on their earnings. Clubs do not pay income tax on the income they obtain from members. They pay a minimal tax on earnings from visitors. They don't pay land tax at all, and their water rates are minute alongside hotels. They should be taxed the same as any other business in the community.
Mr McInerney, could your viewpoint be seen to be a tinge of sour grapes? After all, clubs have to cater for setbacks such as random breath testing, the same as hotels.
Club was never intended to be a competitor to a hotel or a restaurant or a fish shop proprietor. That's what he is now. And if he intends to operate as a competitor to other businesses, he should pay the same tax as any other business.
A total of 10 roller skaters from Bennett's Green and Newcastle clubs will be in Adelaide. Skaters have been putting in long hours, perfecting their routine. Hence the local skaters will be tiny class free skating, seen the ladies free skating, figures, men's figures, and dancing. Australian champion free skater Catherine Patterson, the former national champion of dance and Australian junior mixed figures title holder. 8 of the 10 Newcastle skaters going to Adelaide in just under 2 weeks represented New South Wales last year, while others have competed at previous nationals.
Thank you, John. Good morning. A beautiful start to the day. It's nice and sunny. Looks like being quite a mild day as well. Around the beaches this morning, small waves, still offshore winds, beautiful conditions, but not much around for the board riders. There's a fine line between Lake City and Flat City, and for the sake of argument this morning, I think we'll call this Lake City. The waves are under 1 metre at all of the open beaches. They don't look like getting any bigger just for the time being, although there is the possibility that there is a southeasterly swell building over the next couple of days or so. This morning though, it's quite small. Conditions will improve a little later today with the tide going out. At least the waves will be a little bit more prevalent. At the moment, there aren't many around at all here at Merewether. Some of the only waves breaking around our city beaches. If you'd like to go for a swim this morning or today, all of our city beaches are quite safe. And what's the weather like today? The forecast reads fogs and frosts for the inland, and then a dry, cool and mild day. Partly cloudy inland, but sunny on the coast. Westerly winds at 10 to 30 kilometres per hour and slight seas on a low swell. Newcastle heading for a top today of 19 degrees, 18 degrees for Scone. High tide will be at 9:45 this morning, 1.5 metres. The following low tide at 24 minutes past 3 this afternoon, 0.3 of a metre. And the outlook for Thursday, early fogs and then a dry, sunny day. Well, that's the story this morning. Small waves for the board riders, in fact tiny, under 1 metre at the open beaches. Still offshore winds, beautiful conditions weather-wise, a top today of 19 degrees. Have a great day whatever you're doing. Back again tomorrow morning.
Good morning, everyone. Well, how's your memory? A few weeks ago I did suggest that if you had any surplus money you would be well advised, and I'm talking about fixed interest investors, you would be well advised to look at Premier State bonds. I bought mine and I hope you did the same. Now even in the last couple of weeks we've seen a sizable fall in official interest rates. I, for example, was able to earn 15.6% for that long-term Premier State bond. At the moment there are no Premier State bonds around. In fact there is a great shortage of scrip, as we say, with regard to any quality fixed interest investment. But let's suppose there is a new Premier State bond announced in the next week or so. I would strongly suggest that the interest rate, if we're lucky, will be well below 15%. Or perhaps I should have said, if we're unlucky, well below 15. And let me take you back about 12 months ago. Do you remember the telecom loans and similar loans like Northern Territory and Australian National Railways that were offering interest rates of 17% plus for 10 and 15-year terms? Do you remember me saying you should almost mortgage the house to invest in these government guaranteed investments? Because in my view, those rates would not stay there for very much longer. Forgive me for sounding a little, shall we say, conceited, but I was right. Having said all that, let's look ahead. If you missed out on Premier State bonds, if you missed out on Gas and Fuel Corporation, if you've missed out on Brisbane City Council or the Queensland Development Loan, don't miss out on the next local government loan or semi-governmental loan or telecom loan. Because I still believe 12 months from now, 18 months from now, interest rates, official interest rates, all being well, will be about 1 to 2% below what they are today. And we're only talking about an initial investment of just $100. I'll see you next Monday.